Dr. Salloway received his MD from Stanford Medical School and completed residencies in neurology and psychiatry at Yale University. He is the Director of Neurology and the Memory and Aging Program at Butler Hospital and the Professor of Neurology and Psychiatry at the Alpert Medical School of Brown University. Dr. Salloway is an internationally recognized leader in clinical trials for the prevention and treatment of Alzheimer's disease. He has served as the lead or contributing author for important publications in the treatment of the disease in the New England Journal of Medicine, in Nature, and JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association Neurology. Under his direction, the Butler Hospital Memory and Aging Program has conducted more than 100 clinical trials, developing new diagnostic tests and treatments for memory loss. And his program is currently conducting 5 prevention trials for individuals at high risk for Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Salloway works closely with the National Alzheimer's Association on key initiatives to advance research and treatment on and for Alzheimer's disease. I present to you Dr. Stephen Salloway.
How many people are still here? Thanks all of you for coming today to be part of this important, we'll call this session a town hall meeting, part of today's caregiver journey. And I'm just so excited and looking forward to this. Ever since I got the invitation, it's a great honor and it's a great opportunity. And I'm going to focus today on building the Alzheimer's Army, what Rhode Islanders can do. It's so great to see representatives of the congressional delegation right down front because they're so important in helping this fight against Alzheimer's. Can you hear me in the back? Hold on. How about now? Okay. Okay, now I hope you'll accept ideas from someone who's not a native Rhode Island. I've been here 27 years, still settling in. But the good news is I'm married to a native Rhode Islander, so that increases my credibility. And she has a bumper sticker that says, "This card does not leave Rhode Island." So I understand a little bit about Rhode Island mentality. So I think we just have a terrific opportunity being a small state and actually having an outsized impact on the fight against Alzheimer's disease. So my disclosures, I don't really have any relevant disclosures for today or conflicts with today's talk. One thing I've learned from focusing on Alzheimer's research for so many years is we all need to be relentless in fighting Alzheimer's disease. This is not an easy disease to defeat, and we really need to stay the course and provide bring as much creativity and talent as we can to the fight against Alzheimer's disease. I'm very inspired by the Alzheimer's Association. We work very closely with the National Alzheimer's Association, and you see Maria Carrillo pictured up here. She and her staff actually lent me some slides, including this one for today's talk. And Maria is just a terrific, she was last year's keynote here, so I'm very honored to follow her. And she's just a terrific advocate, both on the science and the civic side, the advocacy side, for Alzheimer's research and Alzheimer's care. And I think we have a terrific Rhode Island chapter headed by Donna and her staff who are really doing important work in And the vision of the Alzheimer's Association is really a world without Alzheimer's disease. Now imagine that we could prevent Alzheimer's disease, that Rhode Island could help lead the way, and that all of us here could be part of it. How fantastic would that be? I really think we have that opportunity. So I want you to keep that in mind during my remarks. And the mission of the Alzheimer's Association is really a great guide. They're really, what we're learning as we move into prevention studies for Alzheimer's disease is there are two components. One is great science, and the other is civic engagement. Because we're talking about identifying people at risk and trying to lower the risk. And that's a whole different thing than people coming with impairment to a doctor for care. These are all of us, as we age, our chance of Alzheimer's goes up, and then having other risk factors increases collectively. And it's identifying that risk as early as possible and trying to lower that risk. And so the Alzheimer's Association is doing a fantastic job leading the way. So I'm very happy to be on this stage to support the work that's going on here internationally by the Alzheimer's Association. People often ask me how I got involved in this work, and I think most of us here have a personal experience with Alzheimer's disease or dementia. My first experience was with my grandmother. You see pictured here, Lena Salloway. And she developed dementia, had a long course of it, and for early on in her illness, she came to live with us, and we only had one extra bed in our house. It was in my room. So she stayed with me for a while, and I got to see, some of the ravages of dementia and the effect it has on families from an early age. So I think it had a big impact on me as I was making career choices. But I think most of us have had an experience, or many experiences, with close friends or family that have really influenced us. Why is Alzheimer's such a big problem? I don't need to really tell this audience, but just so we're all on the same page. Age is the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. The rate doubles every 5 years after age 65. And for people who are 85 and older, the rate is somewhere between 30 to 50%. So most of us are going to live out our fuller lifespan. It doesn't mean we're going to get Alzheimer's as we get older, but the chance certainly goes up with age. We project that there will be 125 million people worldwide with dementia by 2050. That is a staggering number. The cost of care is already greater than that in care for cancer or heart disease, and that's going to increase as the population ages. Women are more affected, both with Alzheimer's and involved in the care for people with Alzheimer's. And Congress is getting older, and one of the few things that both sides agree on is that Alzheimer's is bad. And there's now a national plan, and Congress has been very active in this dimension to fight Alzheimer's disease. And the main goal is to prevent or effectively treat Alzheimer's by 2025. That's not far away. And so we're working hard to reach that goal, but we're going to have to work even harder. So let me just show you, if I can, this video. Yeah.
Americans are living with Alzheimer's. It's the most expensive disease in the country. Alzheimer's costs taxpayers $20 million every hour.
Medication.
$9 billion a year. That will quadruple to over $1 trillion in just one generation. Alzheimer's is a national health crisis we can't afford. Millions of Americans are living with Alzheimer's. As the most expensive disease in the country, Alzheimer's costs taxpayers $20 million every hour and costs the country $259 billion a year. That will quadruple to over $1 trillion in just one generation. Alzheimer's is a national health crisis we can't afford. Action is needed now. Congress must increase Alzheimer's research funding. It's time for our first survivor.
So I think this Alzheimer's is our #1 public health problem worldwide. And it disproportionately affects people from different backgrounds. So Hispanics and Latinos have a higher rate, African Americans even a little bit higher. And the percent of people that actually come for care from these groups and participate in research is very low. So we have a major challenge. Maybe we could just finish this a little. We have a major challenge in recruiting people into clinical research that come from different backgrounds, so we can see how well medicine patients work in different groups, and also see what the risk factors are, and try to mediate those for different groups. So this is a big challenge. Now, Rhode Island has had a strong spirit of volunteerism, and we're going to need that in the years ahead. And anybody recognize the ship burning over there in the corner? The Gaspee, right. So the Revolutionary War probably began right here in Rhode Island with the burning of the Gaspee. I love the sideburns here. You just can't get sideburns like that these days. From General Burnside here in the Civil War in Rhode Island. And it turns out making donuts was a really big thing in World War I. There were women that went over to the front lines in France and made up to 250,000 donuts a day, so that the troops on the front lines could actually have cocoa and donuts during the battle. And then here's a group of women who volunteered as nurses that went over to World War I. So, from Rhode Island. So we have a long history of volunteerism. And I think we have to adapt the Uncle Sam needs you for the Army with a Rhode Island theme. So I would go more with Uncle Salty wants you for the Rhode Island Alzheimer's Army. We're more low-key here in Rhode Island. And I think Rhode Island really could be an incubator for innovation in Alzheimer's research. I think we have the right size. I think we have the right personality. I think our people are our best asset. We have great memory programs in universities. We have an awesome Alzheimer's Association. The Rhode Island state government leaders are strongly in favor. You'll hear from the Lieutenant Governor today. You can see down below, we recruited an excellent Alzheimer's scientist, Paula Gramis, who is running the Ryan Institute, and Tom and Kathy Ryan made a generous gift to fund neuroscience research down at URI. And I think we just really have the right ingredients here to make a big impact. We have 3 great clinical research programs right here in the Providence area, the Rhode Island Mood and Memory, the Alzheimer's program over at Rhode Island Hospital, and our program over at Butler Hospital. So that's really important. And just to give you some statistics about some of the things we're doing here in Rhode Island in Alzheimer's research, we're currently testing more than 20 treatments for the prevention and treatment of Alzheimer's disease. So this is not something that's down the road in the future. This is something that's going on right now. We've opened the era of Alzheimer's prevention right here in Rhode Island. We did the very first infusion for a major prevention trial here at Butler Hospital. And there's groundbreaking laboratory research taking place at Brown and URI. We're creating new models, including today, for getting the public involved with the swab that we're hosting together with the Alzheimer's Association, which is right over in that corridor, to detect risk for Alzheimer's. And we've been involved in publications that have had a major impact in shaping research in Alzheimer's disease. And we're building stronger collaborations. That's one great thing about Rhode Island. It's a small state. People know one another. And there are growing collaborations between Brown and URI and also other institutions in Rhode Island and around the country. Imagine if we could harness the talent of brain sciences. So Brown, I'm just showing you the number of programs at Brown that could contribute to Alzheimer's research. And some of these you would imagine, like neurology and psychiatry, but others, engineering, computer science, physics, big data, just so many groups, so much talent, and we're so excited. Last week you probably heard the announcement that the Carney family, pictured up in the corner, has given $100 million to advance brain science at Brown. And that is amazing. This is huge, and this really puts Brown in the major leagues of brain science research. And we need advocacy to make sure as much of that money as possible goes to disease-oriented research like Alzheimer's disease. When you ask older people what condition they fear most, what's the answer? Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's. What are they afraid of? I need to tell the science. What are people afraid of? People are afraid of becoming dependent and losing their identity. This is captured very well by the self-portraits of William Gutermold, who developed Alzheimer's and drew images of himself throughout the course of his illness. And people are afraid of losing their personhood and their identity. One thing that research does is provides hope, and it's helping to change the narrative. And we were really excited in the February 26th issue of Time to have a feature of a Rhode Island couple, the Woodings, some of you may know them. He's participating in a clinical trial for Alzheimer's, and it's a just very hopeful article, and I think we made some copies of it, if you haven't seen it, out there at the Butler desk, and it's helping to change the narrative. It's transforming fear into action. So there's fear out there, which we all know, and it's pervasive, but what we need to do is transform that into action to fight Alzheimer's disease. Messages like this are extremely important. We also need to build a research infrastructure, a global research infrastructure, to be successful. And there have been some wonderful public-private partnerships, which the NIH and Pharma, the Alzheimer's Association, and other groups have helped to sponsor that are making a big difference. One of these is called the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative, and that's a study to identify who is going to develop memory loss as we get older. And we develop tests that will tell us to predict memory loss. And this has been so successful. It's now in its third 5 years of funding from the NIH. All the data goes real time to one center at the University of Southern California. Any researcher around the world can access this data, and there's been over 1,400 scientific publications from this research project. And because of what we've learned, we now are doing prevention trials from this data set. So partnerships like this have been terrific. There are other consortia that are also been very impactful. I'll just mention one or two. One is called the Diane study. That's for families you might have seen on 60 Minutes who have early onset Alzheimer's disease and have a mutation that causes Alzheimer's to begin in the 40s and the 50s. And we're studying these families from around the world, and I'll show you in a minute how impactful that has been. So there are a number of initiatives, and I just want to encourage our congressional staffers to keep supporting these are really making a difference. And I'll show you some evidence of that. So we know that research works from other diseases. Think about polio, what a scourge that was, and how it's almost completely eradicated from the face of the earth. Chemotherapy, you might have heard recently, some of these new precision medicine treatments for cancer are amazing. They've to target a specific protein, not just on one cancer, but on other cancers, numerous, not just in lung cancer, but numerous cancers that carry the same protein that can eradicate the cancer. So we're making significant progress there. HIV was horrible, and now it's a much more manageable illness. So, support for research is critical. And I'm really impressed by what other groups have done. I think we can draw inspiration from them. Diane and I were at a Patriots game a couple of years ago, and at halftime, who came up? It was Breast Cancer Day at Patriot Place, and front and center are all these advocates for breast cancer. Well, I know the Alzheimer's Association is working on this, but we should be doing the same thing, having the same prominence. And in HIV, it really was activism that got Congress to earmark funds for HIV funding, higher than Alzheimer's disease, much higher than Alzheimer's disease. $2 billion a year is a guarantee for 10 years because of the advocacy and activism. So we need to be relentless, we need to be vocal, we need to be advocate. We are making progress in terms of funding. We're going to need to invest. Alzheimer's is tough, I can tell you. You all know how tough it is, and I can tell you from the research side how tough it is. We're going to need a major investment, and we're stagnant for a number of years from the NIH, but because of the national plan and increased funding from Congress this year, and the Alzheimer's Association has played a major lead role in advocacy here. We expect to have $1.8 billion this year from NIH, which is terrific. Cancer has more than $6 billion. HIV still has more than Alzheimer's. So we're on the right road, but we still have quite a ways to go. Bill Gates recently announced a $100 million gift for Alzheimer's research. That's terrific, and I think that's going to stimulate others to contribute as well. So let's talk a little bit about what Alzheimer's is and the advances we've made in understanding and fighting it. Here's Dr. Alzheimer and his first patient, Auguste D. She was 51 at the time, and she developed memory loss and change in behavior. He examined her brain. These are his drawings, what he saw under the microscope, the plaques and the tangles of Alzheimer's disease, two types of proteins that build up in clumps in the brain. And these have remained the hallmark pathology of Alzheimer's disease. There are abnormal proteins that start to accumulate in the brain, and they stimulate the immune system, usually initially in a good way to try to clear this debris that's building up in the brain, but then the immune system often gets overactivated and actually can cause damage itself. So there's an immune process that's involved as well. And the brain can tolerate a certain amount of this, but once the synapses, the connections between nerve cells start to break down and the nerve cells are lost, that's when the memory loss and the change in functioning begins. And you can see later in the illness, the brain shrinks gradually over time. And as it does, people become more impaired. Now, in Dr. Alzheimer's time, we had to wait until someone passed away to be able to see the pathology. But a major advance has been being able to see the plaques and now the tangles safely with brain imaging, many years before the memory loss. This is a terrific advance. And what we do, we can do this over at Rhode Island Hospital or in a mobile PET scanner anywhere in the state, someone gets an IV, we inject a tracer, we wait an hour, and then this tracer binds to the plaques if they're present. And you can see here on this image above, all the red and yellow areas are filled up with amyloid plaque. So we can now see the plaque safely in many years before the memory loss. How did this, and we have 3 tracers that are approved by the FDA. How did this happen? Well, I want to give shout outs to some people who really made a big contribution. This is Jim Kelly and his wife Dell. He had Alzheimer's disease. He was one of our early participants. in this brain imaging trial. And what the FDA required is that people who were terminally ill undergo an amyloid PET scan. He went over to Rhode Island Hospital, and then when he passed away, he donated his brain, and we compared what we saw under the microscope with what we saw on the scan. So the FDA said, we want to make sure what we're seeing there really are the plaques of Alzheimer's. And Diane and I went to his house to obtain the consent. Obtaining consent from a dying person is a big thing, especially in their home. And this was one of our early studies like this, so we weren't very experienced. And he was very frail, near the end of life. And he said to his wife, "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Are you sure you can handle this?" And she said, "Absolutely." He was a Korean War vet. And excuse me. He said he wants to make this final contribution to science, to fight Alzheimer's, so that his children and grandchildren don't have to deal with this illness and die of this illness. So we didn't know how it would go, but it went fine. We took an ambulance over there, he had the scan, went back home, and his family followed through with the brain donation. And he was one of the people that led to the approval of one of these tracers, which is terrific. So it's very, very inspiring, and this is the kind of contribution that each of us can make in our own way. This is a dramatic form. Now, I have to tell you, the FDA has approved 3 of these tracers. This is a fabulous addition to care, because often when you diagnose Alzheimer's, a clinician makes the best judgment about whether or not the memory loss is due to Alzheimer's. But about 20% of the time or more, we're wrong. Even in the best of centers. And now we have a way to test. This is terrific. We can find out if we're right or not. And then also guide therapy, see if someone's eligible for a research trial with a number of advantages. Medicare won't pay for it. Someone like Jim Fidel made this contribution. Medicare won't pay for it. I went down there where they had the advisory hearing to decide whether or not to approve this, and I told this story about Jim Fidel, and I said, this discredits this contribution. This person was on their deathbed, and they are fighting Alzheimer's. They did a great thing. We've now made a big scientific advance, and it should be covered. It has real value. The Alzheimer, Maria Carrillo was very active in advocating in the association. I went and met with the deputy director from CMS, in addition to going to that advisory board, and they went still in the group. One guy, one scientist, almost got into a fight with the advisors. He was so upset about it. It's very upsetting, it really is. And one thing as a compromise, CMS approved a study to evaluate the clinical utility of this treatment, of this test, and called the IDEAS trial, which has been great. So they approved, they probably actually spending more money on this trial than they would have if they just approved it for routine care. They approved 18,000 PET scans, which has been great. And we did over 100 at our place. The Rhode Island Hospital was part of the study. But now the study's over, so we don't have access to this clinical test right now. It's too expensive for people to pay on it. Right. The association is leading the way and has asked for a renewal of what's called New Ideas trial, and CMS is reviewing it. So our congressional staffers might be able to help with this, getting this over the line, and getting CMS to approve this extension of the trial, so at least patients and researchers and clinicians will have access to this diagnostic test. So as you can see, this is a very dynamic area, and with sort of between research and the public and government. Another major advance is in genetics. So I said aging is the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's. The second biggest risk factor is genetics. And we've identified some mutations. These are uncommon that cause early onset Alzheimer's. This is a terrific advance scientifically. And we've also identified the most common risk gene called the ApoE4 gene. And that's the gene we're testing for today in the swabbing event, which is next door. That doesn't mean if you have this gene, it doesn't mean you're going to get Alzheimer's, but it tells you whether or not you're at higher risk. And I got to give a shout out. There's so many inspiring. One great thing about working in this area is there's so many inspiring people every day who are just really moved by the courage and the generosity of people who volunteer to participate in research. So this is Maritza Silberto and her husband. She comes from a family with one of these mutations that causes early onset Alzheimer's. Her mother is affected. She cares for her. She's participating in research in the Diane study that I mentioned. She's a tremendous advocate, and she's advising us about how to do these studies right. And this study, the Diane study, we're looking at families who carry this mutation that causes early onset Alzheimer's, and we're studying people who have the mutation and people who don't. And one thing we've learned is that the plaques and the tangles build up 15 to 20 years before the memory loss. So the changes are occurring in the brain long before the memory symptoms become apparent. I'll just show you, I hope. You can see on the bottom here is the years till expected onset of memory loss. So now we're 20 years out, and you can see the blue areas, the plaques are starting to build up. And then by 10 years out, they're pretty well developed in the brain. And by the time of the memory loss, there's a lot of the plaque burden is very high. We suspected this, but having these families volunteer, we can actually provide the evidence that proves that these changes are occurring. And we've also are now testing tracers that look at tau protein, the second major protein that builds up in tangles. And we're doing a similar study for people who are terminally ill. So the FDA will approve the first tracers to look at tau PET. And this is a major advance. Because now we can see the plaques and now the tangles. And we can tell where someone is in terms of their risk for Alzheimer's disease. So if you look over on the far left of that screen, you can see there's no amyloid buildup and there's not much tau buildup. So that person is not showing the early changes of Alzheimer's disease. But let's say that person carried a mutation and we knew they were going to develop Alzheimer's in 15 years, because it's an expected age of onset. We've just submitted a grant, hopefully it's going to be approved by the NIH, to do an early prevention trial. So we can give a medicine to keep the plaques from even building up. So because we have these new brain imaging techniques, we can be more precise in giving the right drug to the right patient at the right stage of the disease. Let's take the person in the middle here. This is someone who's cognitively normal, but they have a lot of plaques already, and the tangles are starting to spread from the memory area into the neighboring regions of the brain. And they happen the beginning of Alzheimer's disease in the brain. They don't yet have the symptoms, but they have the protein markers that designate the beginning of the disease. So we can target them with treatments to actually lower the amyloid and lower the tau, and hopefully delay the onset of the memory loss. Because of these advances, we now view Alzheimer's much differently. We used to have to wait till someone had dementia before we could diagnose Alzheimer's. But it turns out there's really a long preclinical phase where the symptoms are not yet developed. An early clinical phase we call mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, and then dementia is really a later stage of Alzheimer's disease. And we want to get, well, like any medical problem, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You wanted to try to treat early to delay the more serious effects of the illness. It turns out that a substantial part of Alzheimer's is probably preventable or modifiable through healthy lifestyle. Okay, so this is from the Lancet. They're estimating 35% of global dementia may be preventable. If you prevent stroke, you lower the rate of dementia. So we don't know yet exactly how to do this, but the elements appear to be staying mentally and physically active, so exercise and keeping your brain stimulated are very important. Staying engaged with other people. Education is beneficial. Keeping your heart healthy keeps the brain healthy. Sleeping well, you may have heard about studies recently about amyloid and sleep. People who sleep better have less amyloid deposits in the brain. And eating a Mediterranean-type diet seems to lower the rate of Alzheimer's disease. So to address this, the Alzheimer's Association is undertaking a new trial called the Pointer Trial, which will evaluate all these treatments combined: good heart health, exercise, good nutrition, cognitive brain training, and for people who are at risk of Alzheimer's, age 60 to 77, to see if we can improve memory and delay memory loss in people with this. So this is great. So getting the lifestyle, healthy brain aging, we all need to do this, because we're all going to live, most of us are going to live longer, and we want to keep our brain healthy as we do that. We have some treatments that are approved for Alzheimer's. We have 5 drugs that are approved. They have a mild benefit. We use them, but they don't substantially alter the course of Alzheimer's. The disease progresses and people typically die of Alzheimer's unless something happens in between. And we need treatments, especially for those at higher risk, to modify and change the course of the disease. And we're making progress there too as well. So the article in Time focuses on a drug called aducanumab. That drug is an antibody that's targeted against the amyloid plaque. It gets into the brain in low concentrations. As you see on this slide, it actually binds to the plaque. It stimulates the immune system to clear the plaque from the brain. And we were very encouraged by the phase 1b results that were featured on the cover of Nature, which is the top science journal in the world, so this was very, very exciting, that the medicine substantially removes plaque from the brain. So on the cover of Nature, you see on the left is a person before treatment, and then 1 year later after treatment. The levels are dramatically reduced. So we have drugs that can actually remove plaque from the brain, which is very exciting. We also have drugs now, just starting this year, that lower tau protein in the brain. And probably the combination of the two are going to have the biggest impact. So we're very excited. I just want to give the idea of where the field is moving. We've made advances in brain imaging, advances in genetics, advances in pharmacology, and an understanding about lifestyle factors. So we're getting the elements together that we really need to focus on and target to prevent Alzheimer's disease or change the course of Alzheimer's. So because the plaques and the tangles build up 15 to 20 years before, it gives us this long interval, this silent window where we can intervene and try to prevent or delay the memory loss. And that's where the basis of the prevention trials. And now we have some of the tools to detect the people who are at risk. We didn't have this before. And studies like the ADNI study that I mentioned helped us develop these tools. So I'm very excited that we actually did the first infusion for what's called the A4 trial. This is for people 65 to 85, no memory loss. We all have memory loss when you age, but no significant memory loss, and who have an amyloid PET scan, and those that are building up plaques are eligible to receive a medicine to lower amyloid or placebo to delay memory loss. Now, this is a big question. Should I find out more about my risk of Alzheimer's? That's a very individual decision. And we don't take a position about that. We're certainly supportive another piece of medical information. It could make a difference in how you plan ahead, whether or not you participate in a research trial, if you're at higher risk. The nice thing is that to find out more now, we actually have treatments that might modify or lower your risk. So that gives you an additional incentive to find out more. But that's something that people have to wrestle with. And the good news is that 70% of people who volunteered for this trial found out that they weren't building a plaques. And some of them were sure, like this retired nurse, that we cared for her mother. She's 70, and she was having some mild memory symptoms, and she was sure she had Alzheimer's. And she volunteered for the study, and she found out that she wasn't building a plaques, and her husband made her this t-shirt. And then she convinced him to participate in another prevention trial. And he was sure he wasn't at risk. It turns out he was building up plaques. So it's hard to tell. And we're trying to get better at predicting who's likely to be positive and who's negative. But now we have a number of prevention trials underway in Providence for people ages 60 to 85. So there are a lot of opportunities to participate. We need to recruit hundreds of thousands of people in order to test the medicines that the studies we have underway and planned. That's a big undertaking, okay? So we're learning how to do this. One way, we talked about the Alzheimer's Army. One part of the Army are people working in memory programs. I want to give a huge shout out to our memory and aging program staff. They're just terrific people. The nice thing about coming to our program or other memory centers, it's like a club. There's a love fest that goes on most days, and it's a very warm and supportive environment. And people, people say, gee, I don't want to be a guinea pig and so forth, but the people who decide to participate actually enjoy coming. Often people have to come once a month to get an infusion. People look forward to it because it's just a warm and welcoming place, and they feel like they're doing something against Alzheimer's, especially for their children. So I want to talking about the Army. So there are staffs in the memory programs. We're great, but I tell you, there's not enough of us. This is a much bigger problem that can be solved in a specialty clinic. Okay? So we need volunteers. Well, not only that, we need volunteers who are actually going to go out and do the recruiting. Because there aren't enough of us to do the work. I want to give a shout out to Peter Bristol. He was the first participant in the A4 study. He was also generous enough to have his story covered. It was picked up by Reuters and the Wall Street Journal, and there were people fighting to get into the infusion suite to take pictures, and it was just a very exciting thing. Another great technique you may have heard about is retinal imaging. Can the eye be the window to the brain? Can we see the early changes of Alzheimer's with a routine eye exam using equipment that's available in doctor's offices? And Jessica Alpert is here, one of our young investigators who's working on this. Peter Snyder is taking the lead role. He was at Lifespan, but he's now Vice President for Research at the University of Rhode Island. And we're about to launch a major study to see if we can track this risk factor and detect early changes in the eye. And if we can, I think this will have a major impact, because then eye doctors can help diagnose Alzheimer's using equipment that's available. It's going to be way more cost-effective. And this is another exciting thing is people are used to having eye exams, and it's not an invasive test. And making it easy to get involved in research is really important, so this is a great technique. Another thing that's really captivated people's imagination is swabbing for Alzheimer's. So we've started having swabbing parties. And today we're so excited about, we're breaking new ground here with hosting a swabbing event with the Wound Memory Program to test for this ApoE gene and we either carry 0, 1, or 2 copies of this risk gene. If you carry 1 copy, you're at somewhat increased risk. 2 copies, you're at higher risk. If you have no copies and you live long enough, you can still get Alzheimer's disease. So it tells you more about your risk, and it also tells you whether or not you're going to be, you may be eligible to participate in the clinical trial to lower the risk. And I talked to people or groups around the country about this, and people are so excited about it. And we're really pleased that Wayne Miller has really been terrific in covering these developments in Alzheimer's research. And he had this article on the front page of the Providence Journal, and hundreds of people called up after that article came out and to volunteer. But not only that, about 15 or 20 community groups said, we want to host swabbing parties, Rotary clubs, garden clubs, sororities. And I talked to Brown alumni groups around the country. They said, gee, we want to host that too. And we're going to, the class of 68 is hosting the first reunion swab here at Brown this May. They're a great group. They're troublemakers, so they like to disrupt things. So it's wonderful. But this is great. And I think this is actually the key to success. If people in the community embrace this and actually take the lead in recruiting, we can really make a big impact against Alzheimer's. And there's an opportunity. We have a volunteer sign-up sheet for those people who are interested over at our memory and aging program table. Please let us know. And if your group or organization would like to host a swabbing event, that would be terrific. So just to be clear, if you carry 1 or 2 copies of this gene, it doesn't mean you're going to get Alzheimer's. It just means you have a higher chance of developing Alzheimer's at some point. So all this great activity, the wonderful media coverage, media is really the key to success here. People need to know what the options are. We've developed a prevention registry, and over 1,000 people have already volunteered. And over 300 people are now participating in research studies based on all the activity and the publicity that's been going on. This is fantastic. But we need to scale this even higher. We're on the right track, but we need to scale this even higher. So, where are we going for the future? 2025 is just around the corner. I think the future is going to, Alzheimer's will be much more manageable than it is today. And it's going to be due to a combination of healthy lifestyle. That means my time must be up. The lights are getting. Healthy lifestyle and medications to lower risk. And I think it's going to require combination therapy. We don't know what those combinations are going to be just yet. Although I'll tell you, the Alzheimer's Association, I'm helping to co-chair a session in 2 weeks down in DC on combination therapy for Alzheimer's disease. So we're trying to plan this out. For sure, healthy lifestyle is going to be a core component. Medicines that lower amyloid and tau and also protect the brain with aging are going to be important. And HIV, when it first was recognized, it had devastating effects. It shortened people's lives. One drug was approved, it only had a minor impact, but now there's combination treatment that really has changed the course of HIV, so we can take inspiration there. I told you about some of the treatments that are available now, but there are other treatments that are right around the corner that are really exciting in terms of stem cells for Alzheimer's, editing genes that cause Alzheimer's, silencing genes, stimulating the brain in different ways with brain stimulation. And then one really important goal is developing a blood test for Alzheimer's. And there's been some really encouraging news this year from 2 different centers that there may be a blood test that can predict Alzheimer's years before the memory loss. And that would be a lot cheaper and easier to obtain than some of the testing we have now. So, what can you do? Well, all of us need to keep our heart and brains healthy. Help us build Alzheimer's research in Rhode Island. I think talking about Alzheimer's helps reduce the stigma, spreading the word, hosting a swapping party, volunteering, advocating, helping raise money for Alzheimer's research, and sign up if you're eligible for a prevention registry and consider participating in research. And I put a list of Alzheimer's prevention registries on here. There are 2 Rhode Island ones, and the other 3 are national ones. We made copies of that list over at the Butler table if people want to get it. So, I don't think, maybe we can get the lights back up. So I'd like to finish together with all of us reciting, "The end of Alzheimer's begins with us." The end of Alzheimer's begins with us.